What up, people? Welcome to the Doing Everything Different podcast. I'm your host, Devin Lars, and today we got a very special guest, a dude I've been admiring and a fan of his work for a long time. So excited to kind of sit down and have this conversation. He is the co-owner of Trophy Hunting. He also runs a design consultancy called Doc Studios and has worked with some of the dopest brands in the world, leading creative and helping with creative direction. So super excited to hop into this conversation. Dustin Canalin, welcome to the show.
No, thanks for having me, Devin. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, we started talking a little bit before we got started around just, we've been kind of going back and forth on Instagram, kind of following each other's journey for a while now. I don't even know how we initially got connected, but excited to jump in and have a conversation because your work is just dope, man. I've been seeing it everywhere. And I feel like in the last year, I feel like it's kind of really taken it to a whole nother level. And so I just kind of wanted to start from the beginning. I know that you're a creative director. How did it all start?
Yeah, so I think to kind of answer your question on how we met, it was just me always staying tapped into the Bay. Mm-hmm. I'm originally from the Bay. I grew up in Alameda, played sports all throughout Oakland and everywhere. Kind of grew up on a baseball field or in a basketball gym, but always had visions of like working for Nike. Like that was the dream, that was the goal. So I went to school out there to California College of Arts, and after there went to and1 basketball, which was this was like 1999, 2000, like the heyday. And it was like, I always compare it to Yahoo of the athletic apparel and footwear industry, because, here I was probably one of the first or second designers there that actually like knew how to make shit.
Yeah.
And I kind of just challenged everything that was going on. So if I had a problem and I thought their t-shirt sucked or they could do something better, they would just be like, all right, well, here's how you send files to the factory, figure it out. And, I learned, I have a traditional graphic design background, but and1 was really my college of just making stuff. So I learned apparel design, footwear design, like all at the factory level. So, with design and anything, it's all about communicating your ideas. And it's the same thing communicating to the factories on like how you want stuff. So that's where the technical skill kind of comes from and allowed me to kind of blossom out. So after and1.
So I remember the and1 mixtape tours. I used to go at the Oracle Arena and stuff like that. So was and1 its own apparel division? Was it under a certain company? Because I didn't know that.
No, and1 was started in like 92 by a bunch of guys that went to Penn and were like friends, and they started with these trash talk tees that people have seen, and it kind of turned into like a huge $300 million company, and they owned and operated everything internally. So we made our own footwear, apparel, everything. So I ran the apparel division and made all the mixtape uniforms.
That's dope.
So it was either me or my team. But it was fun. You know what I mean? Like there weren't any rules. The mixtape at the time was on ESPN. So it was like a huge platform for, the brand. And it was a crazy time because I got to go to every game. They would we would hoop in the gym with hot sauce and Headache and all these guys. And like really, for me, it was cool because it's like I always admired New York culture, and to be kind of like thrown into it. And it's just like you're with like real street ball culture of the time and got to meet everybody. And even to this day, it's like my Rolodex is full of people who've kind of started at and1 and went on to other places. But
yeah, I remember those days. Escalade, the Professor, those were the days. Those were some good times.
Nah, it was fun, especially from a designer standpoint, because at a lot of these companies, like design usually isn't invited to the party and to the fun stuff. And to be able to kind of witness everything firsthand, it just kind of gives me leverage now, just because it's like I was really there. And from that experience, after and1 had sold their company, I started a company called Undercrown. And Underground was probably like one of the first real basketball companies built on the lifestyle and culture of basketball. So it wasn't made to like run up and down the court or jump higher. It was basically made to tell the stories of basketball culture and create like off the court lifestyle pieces. And you know, it was fun. It was really successful, and it was like a rocket ship. We kind of knew what we were doing, but this was, you know, 2005 at the heyday of streetwear. And you know, for us being kind of in the sports lane, it was a little different because most of the other streetwear brands came from either skate or some other like music, and we kind of tried to blend it all. So we were kind of early into that genre of sports graphics for lifestyle, which you see everywhere now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's like I'm super proud that that happened, and I see a ton of other brands kind of doing stuff in our vein and kind of taking it to the next level now. So it was a cool thing. But sometime around 2015, Nike came because they had just signed the deal to do all the NBA licensing.
Mm-hmm.
So I stopped working on Underground to go there. And there's some political stuff because I was still supposed to be able to do Underground at the time, but that wasn't the case. But I got a chance to work on, you know, all of the city edition jerseys. You know, I kind of came in there guns blazing because it was like my dream, but it was already, you know, 10 plus years into my career. So, you know, I came in there, I was like, look, I'm doing the Warriors jerseys without a doubt. And anything else is, you know, up for grabs. But for me, that was my dream. And that's kind of what birthed the town jersey. And I was able
That's
to
dope.
kind of work on and design that jersey, which was a lot less design and more kind of like corporate navigating through like
Mm-hmm.
appeasing like this thread. I would always say it's like we had to thread the needle between not just the team, but the league. Nike has all their initiatives that they're trying to do, the owners, their daughters or wives that like have opinions. So it's like you really kind of had to like build these ironclad decks to like show what you're trying to do and then solve that problem. And that was really kind of a learning experience for me because I was always able to do it without having to say what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And Nike was really the first place where it's like, okay, well, what are you trying to do? How is it going to affect? And then, you know, what is the case study after? So it's like I had a bunch of wins with all the city edition and the uniforms, and I was like, okay, this time I want to do, or for the next thing I want to do, I either want to do something that no one cares about at the time, which was the WNBA. So I got to work on the WNBA uniforms, and then all the signature athletes. So
that's dope.
All the signature athlete products from Kyrie to Giannis, like we launched those, worked with them, and you know, that was fun. And it was, you know, maybe 4 years. I think I worked there for like 4-ish years, and you know, was really trying to get back to New York and live here again and kind of be around the city, just because Portland really wasn't for me. And corporate life was a little harder than I thought it would be. I thought I was at a corporation before, but it wasn't. So, you know, that's when I left. And, you know, maybe a year or so later, a friend of mine, couple friends of mine, like we saw opportunity in like this elevated space, kind of taking what was going on in the marketplace, but do it from an athlete standpoint of like how they live their life. So for trophy hunting, when we started it, the goal was to, you know, create products built for the lifestyles that they live. So it does include basketball, but it also, or whatever sport they play, but it also includes like vacationing and wellness and health and, you know, all the things that kind of go into that lifestyle that not only that they lead, but I lead myself, and friends and colleagues and peers all do the same. Like we're always on airplanes. Like you were just saying, you're in New York. It's like you know that like get here, hit the ground running, and then, you know, consume as much as you can, and then you're back out to the next place. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing now, and that's the long-winded story.
That's
of
dope, man.
that.
I think what's so interesting is that when we're on our path and our journey, we don't get to really appreciate the process from, you know, an outside perspective gets to see it and it's kind of like, oh, this was my story, and it kind of gets glossed over of just like being whatever, but that's some impactful stuff. And I think, so I want to, that seems like a big transition, right? Like you were, you know, working, doing your own thing, and then Nike, you know, you transitioned to Nike and started working on some big projects off the bat. I mean, that's a huge transition. Did Nike seek you out? Did you apply for it? Was it based on relationships? Like how did that relationship happen? Because I know a lot of our listeners want to make transitions like that and build relationships and have opportunities. How did that opportunity come about?
Honestly, it was almost all of that. You know, like I said, I was already in the business for 10 years. A lot of the people that I had worked with and had really good relationships with moved on to whether they were at Nike or other companies. So, you know, my name was always kind of passed around as this like cultural like tactician for basketball. And, you know, I had worked with Mitchell and Ness and Adidas and all of these people as like this special ops person to kind of come in and like give an authentic point of view from someone who's into like basketball culture heavy, from the sneakerhead standpoint all the way to like, you know, the stats and facts of hoop, you know, just because like I'm a diehard Warriors basketball fan in general. So, you know, it's really, I always tell people it's the experience is what's going to get you the opportunity, and your skills are what's going to put you into the position and be able to excel. So, you know, a lot of people know a lot of people, but can they, you know, write a business plan for what they're trying to do, or can they draw and design? Like there's all kinds of other things that go into these jobs that people want to do. But I think a lot of the times you either don't have the opportunity because you either don't have the skills to showcase to be seen, or you just haven't, you know, been around long enough. Because it's like a lot of people just like want instant gratification. And don't get me wrong, some do. Like I was very surprised when I went to Nike and people were like, oh, I just, you know, I was working at a screen printer in Oregon and now I'm designing jerseys. And I was like, oh shit, like this was like my childhood dream. So it's a weird dynamic of talent, but it's a combination of right place at right time, but also, you know, putting yourself in the position to be lucky in the right way.
What was that feeling like when you got that acceptance letter, or whenever, like when it was official, when you were like, okay, damn, this is really happening? What was that like? Do you remember like the first person you called, or like just
I definitely called my brother, like my youngest brother, who was really you know, I kind of had him under my wing and showed him the ropes, and he ended up going to art school and working for Pharrell and like doing all these amazing things. But he got the job at Nike first, like 6 months before. So he already kind of got the shine from my mom of like, oh, I work at Nike. And so it was just funny that, you know, I was going to be able to kind of go and do this, because it's like I had all the pictures when you're 5 of drawing like people with Nikes on, or Michael Jordan, this or that. But it was great. You know, it was one of those things where, you know, almost like the trophy hunting thing that we were just talking about enjoying the process and kind of being in the moment. Whereas like that was like my ceiling. And it was weird because the first day I got there, I was so excited up until that point. But then the first day I got there, like I just knew it wasn't for me. Like I went to, like I was there, they were still transitioning like into this new department, but I just could tell like the people were great, but it just wasn't the pace and like the type of energy that I was used to. And I knew that things were slower, and the way that people moved were a lot different just from a corporate standpoint. So it was bittersweet, because it's like at that point I was like, I was in hustle mode again. And it's just like, I couldn't help myself of like trying to get a better opportunity within Nike. And it's like, the greatest thing about Nike is the people that I met, though, is because I was able to like network with the right people and find those right people. They weren't all in my department, but you could kind of seek them out. And it's like, the who's who of design that no one knows about,
Yeah.
And I think like part of that was that, or part of the reason why Nike wasn't for me was that eventually I started working on like really like collaborative projects and was around like Don C or Jerry Lorenzo or people who were my peers at the time. And I'm like, man, they're saying all this stuff. No one's listening to me say that, but these guys like come in from an outsider standpoint, and it's just like they have a little bit more weight. So that's when I kind of knew. I was like, okay, well, my position as a designer might be a little bit more powerful if I were outside again. And that kind of was my goal. Like day one was like, okay, how do I get as much experience as I can, meet as many people as I could, and like tie loose ends with people that I've known for years, and then really kind of take what I've learned and move on. Because I really wanted to like work with the $1 billion corporations. Like that was the goal. It's like I'd done everything else, but sitting with the Lakebs or whoever to pitch these designs, that was the type of experience I was looking for, and managing these teams of like really talented people was cool too, and just the resources alone was amazing.
Oh, right. I mean, they got unlimited resources when it comes to development and all that stuff. Isn't that fascinating? I've been really sitting on that idea of, we have this vision of how we want life to be or what we want to do and what it's going to feel like when we get there. And then when you get there, it's not always what you thought it was, right? Like it's like what you said with Nike. You get there.
Out.
Can you hear me?
I got you now. Yep.
Okay. I was saying that I was sitting on this idea and this concept of, we have this vision and this idea of how it's going to be when we want to accomplish something. And then when we get there, it's like not exactly what we thought it was going to be. And sometimes it's not direct. Maybe it's correlated and connected with what we want, but it's a different route of like how it is, right? You get the experience with Nike and then you're like, oh, really? I need to get this experience, but I need to be on the outside to be able to set this up. So it's a version of it, but it's not what you initially thought. How do you navigate that? Because like, when you get there on day one, you're talking about this was your dream to work for Nike. And then you get there on day one and you're like, this isn't really it. How did you talk yourself or coach yourself through to stay and to understand what you were going to get from the experience?
I think for me, it was already a huge commitment to make that move. So I knew that it wasn't going to be like tomorrow. So what I really tried to do is like map out a game plan of like, okay, well, what are the things I actually have always wanted to do and who I wanted to work with? And like, maybe I can try to figure out how to do that. And, like there's a lot of titles and hierarchy that goes on there, but like with and this is what I've learned about in business in general, is that like the true leaders shine. And it's like, no matter what they are or what they do, they shine. And I didn't know how much I didn't realize the type of leadership skills I had because I had always been doing it myself for the most part, or I was like really young and we didn't know what we were doing. So I was able to like really get into rooms that I probably shouldn't have been able to. And that kind of kept me excited about like going into work, because at the end of the day, it was still Nike, and the work was great. And the resources again were like amazing. It was just the pace and like how things were done that were like totally foreign at that point to me. And I just I just couldn't understand like why people wouldn't want to do the right thing versus like going through this protocol, that takes forever. So, I think the biggest I think the biggest thing that I told myself at that time is that like, this isn't my last move. And I think that's what kind of kicked it in. It's like, you hear athletes talk about this all the time. It's like, you spend your whole time like trying to win the chip, and then you do it. And then it's like, okay, like what's next? And for me, that's really what took my brain into like a new path where it's like, okay, this is checked off the list, like working at Nike, designing my childhood basketball teams uniforms, which is their best selling, by the way, and really thinking about what the next move was. So
you said you sat in these rooms that you feel like you might have not should have been in at the time. Did you deal with imposter syndrome? Because I feel like that's a big thing, and especially with creatives, deal with that. And if so, like, how did you navigate that? Because, you know, I've been there before too. That's hard. You get in these rooms with these, you know, important people and all this stuff, and you're like, what the hell am I doing here?
I still do, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, I was on Gary Vee the other day, and it was like I was so nervous, and you know, it took him saying like, hey, no one is judging you on this, or, you know, you don't have to perform at a certain level. But I'm like, man, like not a lot of people that I know do this stuff. So it's like, I still, you know, like if you're around, like if I'm around my boys and stuff, and it's like, oh, you know, we were at Gilbert Arenas' house, or, you know, I'm working with Kevin Garnett and he yelled at me. Like, people don't get that as like actually happening. It's kind of like, what are you talking about? So it's like, I feel like I live it, unfortunately. And it's like, I'm trying to do less of that, because it is my life, you know, and it has been for a long time. But those rooms were super intimidating. And like, you go in there, and then once you start hearing people like talk nonsense, you're like, oh, okay, I could belong. But, you know, I had a call yesterday, and, you know, we were talking about how harder minorities or people of color have to work just to get to point A. And a lot of people that aren't that, like, not that they don't take it for granted, not that they take it for granted, but they just don't know, you know, the level of high performance that we all have to execute at, you know, because it's like, we're either a token in the room, which I was a lot of the times at Nike, where it's like, oh, and he knows about basketball, and he could like communicate ideas and design. Like, it's very rare, you know, especially at that level. So I learned that quick. But I also got to meet other people that were just like me, and I was like, oh, like, and they were just like, slow down, you know. That would be my thing. It's like, I would talk to all these people, and I was like, man, how did you last here 10 years or this or that? And they're like, man, you just got to pick your spots. And it's like, I just wasn't built up to that. You know, it's like I had too many hardships in running a business and working for like small independent brands, where it's like, you're never the king of the mountain, and Nike is the king of the mountain. It's like, even with the town jersey, it's like I had to step out of it at some point, and the next time I see it, it's like the video that you guys worked on, you know. It's like, oh shit, like this looks amazing. It's like I had a part in that, you know. And it's just one of those things where it was great to experience, because I know that's the level that everyone is competing against, no matter who you are. But, you know, it's a funny thing, you know. And it's like, as I grow my own business now, it's like, we're always thinking like how to not do things corporate, but you always kind of fall back into like, corporate structure is great, and keeping people accountable in the ways that Nike or other corporate companies do, like they do it for a reason. So it's all part of the plan and process of figuring it out.
For sure. Yeah. I've talked to some, it's interesting. You think that some people, I mean, especially myself, right? You get to a certain point and that like goes away, right? From a standpoint of like the imposter syndrome. Yeah. And I remember talking to some like A-game players, like some top dogs that everybody knows, and they talk about how they get nervous and they get this. And I was like, it was just so fascinating to me. And I was even listening to an interview with Ryan Coogler, who, directed Black Panther and all this stuff. And he was talking about how he still struggles with it today and all the great stuff that he's accomplished. And so I think people have this misconception of when you get to a certain point that like goes away, but there's just like new levels to it and you keep going up and having to learn how to navigate it.
No, but I think that's the great thing about growing alongside peers, right? It's like other people have these experiences and you can identify with them. And even like you said, like I'm watching you from afar and I'm seeing you like, oh, you have your own agency and you started this podcast and it's like you have great conversations with people. I'm like, oh, like I would love to do that. I can't do that. Like why would anyone want to listen to me? Like why would anyone care about what I say? And the funny thing that like I've been hearing more is like, yo, you have a lot of knowledge and there's a ton of people who don't know how to get to art school or like all of these things. So if you can inspire like one or two people, then that's great. And shit, I meet people all the time. Like my friends from Nike will call me. It's like, oh, someone's here is like a huge fan of yours. I'm like, what? Really? Why? They're like, oh, when you did Underground, like they didn't know that you can merge design and sports like that. So they got into art school and now they work at Nike. I was like, oh, wow. Because it was like me and then my little brother who I had like direct control on. And I'm just nah, that sucks. Or, and then he became someone who I looked up to. So I'm just trying to get out of my own way.
And that's all of us, right? Like, and that's why I said that even in that story that you say, I could tell you were just kind of like glossing over because it's like regular life to you. But I think from the outside perspective, that journey and what you've been able to accomplish and stuff is very few people can say that. And I think that sometimes we get into, our own, the saying, you can't see the picture when you're in the frame, and I think that what you have accomplished, which is why I wanted to have this conversation, and have you on the show it's been incredible to watch the journey. And I think just even this, I think this is a good segue. I just seen recently, and I don't know when and how long it was in plans, but you just did a collaboration with Puma, right?
Yep.
That was crazy. I'm like, that just was dope with trophy hunting. So this is your own brand. So we're not talking about you coming in there and designing for, we can always do the white label stuff where the brands, the corporate gets the credit because we're designing on their behalf. But to do something that's yours and to be able to do this collaboration, like that's dope as hell. Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, no, that's the new age, right? Like even you were saying like, you're starting to notice more of my work now, but it's like before it was all white labeled. You're like, I signed the NDAs and it's like, you cannot promote this. It's like, I have that in all of my contracts. And I think I got to the point where I had enough credibility and like wins under my belt to where I'm demanding to be accounted for in the process. So there's still things that we do behind the scenes, but with Puma, it's like I was behind the scenes. I had been working with my other creative partner on a ton of projects there, like within Puma basketball, like the Black Five stuff that they're working on, like any of the special projects. Like we were always called in on anything cultural and basketball, and we were able to build relationships with Puma because a friend of mine had worked at Karmaloop in 2005. And it's just one of those things where a small conversation like leads to a collaboration. And my other creative partner, Carrie, she's a woman who loves basketball and kind of operates Underground now. And June Ambrose had just been hired at Puma and they wanted to do a women's focused collaboration. And they're like, you guys would be perfect. And because we were able to like provide kind of a unisex perspective on sports, fashion, and basketball. And, after when you meet people like June or Emery Jones, it's like you really feel like you're there, and they give you a lot of confidence in your abilities to do stuff. So we were able to kind of push the boundaries with Puma and kind of challenge them to let us do more and more. So, the great thing about that collaboration was it took 2 years, like through right, with COVID and factories and people kind of like figuring out office life. But the greatest thing about that is that it was like a 15-piece collection. We did 3 shoes, totally new silhouettes. Like we did everything from the ground up, and we raised a lot of like we had a lot of notice because, you know, we were a small brand when we started, and we don't have the data with Instagram followers or anything to prove it, but it's truly the creative initiative that we had and the design craft that like separated everything. And, you know, we're still trying to figure out like what's next, but you know, we're still in the building, like behind the scenes.
Did you guys have full creative control? Like where it was like, I mean, of course they have to sign off and approve stuff, but was it all mostly you all coming up with, this is how we want to lay it out and structure it?
Yep. Pretty much. And
that's dope.
And I always ask this for people. It's like, I never get the handcuffs. It's always, and sometimes it's bad because it's like, people want to see what you would do first before they like brief you, like, and constrict you. So with that, they were like, no, we want your fully executed vision on what we want to do. Because, you know, obviously the reason why people collaborate too is to be able to be inspired by that and kind of take that into their inline products, and all of that. So, but it was full creative control. Like we worked with some amazing developers and designers, and that's the difference between doing collaborations and doing it on your own, is that operationally, fabric usage, trim development, like all the fees and time that's associated with that, it's a lot easier to do at these bigger companies. So for us, it was a flex of creative, like, need, you know, it's like, this is stuff we want to do for our own line, but we're slowly building up to that, you know, and it's great to kind of collaborate and get the muscle behind you.
I don't know how much you can talk about it, but what was the process like? Did you guys go to their office? Was there like design meetings? Did you guys work on a weekly? I mean, I think this is such a big vision and a goal for people to want to do a collaboration like this. And I think we don't get to see a lot of the behind the scenes. So I'm just wondering, like, the logistics. You said it took 2 years. What was that? Sampling? Like, what did that look like?
It was everything. So initially they were just like, hey, we want to do this project here. Like, we want to do like 5 or 6 styles, and here's kind of like where it's going to sit. And that, when I say sit, I mean like from a distribution standpoint, like it's going to be sold at their retail store, and then like higher end boutiques like Kith or Unknown, like places that sell like high end sportswear. And we kind of took that and we developed a whole concept. So the great thing about kind of our background is that we're able to create the story, concept, strategy, but then also execute the product. Whereas a lot of times it's like one person developing the concept and then another person developing the product, and you never see them align. Or at Nike, they just take whatever the design does and they make a better story and throw money on it and do cool commercials. So for us, we were like thinking about the commercial while we were designing the product. So we pitched them the idea just as from a strategy, like with mood board pulls and just language that we were thinking. And my partner, Carrie, she's from the Bronx, and she has like this, you know, pool of graphics that she's seen growing up. And we were able to kind of like show that within the decks that we presented, and they okayed it, and they're like, great. And then we went straight into design. And after the design process, that's, you know, maybe a couple months of just like fine tuning the design internally on our side. And we gave it to them. They're like, cool. And it's like, it all got tech packed out. We flew up there to present the final tech packs and just like run through, like, this is the type of zipper pulls. These are the type of zippers that we want. We could pull from their library, the footwear, like these are the fabrics. This is the color. This is how we want the box to look. So we're able to kind of be hands-on, like maybe on like a month, like every month we would go up to Boston and kind of either see a sample or do a fitting. And a lot of the time, the reason why it took 2 years was just Puma had so many collaborations going on, and what we were trying to do was bigger than what they had anticipated. So we kept getting pushed and pushed and pushed. And, in the meantime, like we're working on other projects, and we were working on creative direction for Rihanna and getting ready to launch our product, but then her product launched before ours. So, like we're seeing how just the placement of timing of when your product releases is so important. So that was it. It was like a lot of back and forth on what's the best time to release it, because, contrary to what it looks like, everything's like fully thought out and designed and strategized. So from when you see the product out to celebrities to what you're going to say on the first 5 social media posts. So, we're after the product's done, then you go into more of the marketing release schedule where it's like, oh, can we do an event at the store, or can we have a gifting suite at the All-Star game? Like all of these things are kind of coming into play, and we were just trying to figure out and map out the best time. So it wasn't really about like finding that final release date. It was the time that we needed to hit the release running. So I think
do they just give you a budget and just be like, hey, we got X amount,
no,
just do whatever you can do?
And that's another thing. I think it's like when you hire entrepreneurs, like we're so good at using no money. So I think for us, it's like we get paid for the collaboration and we get paid for what sells. But the marketing budgets are kind of up to how you structure your deal or what you bring to the table. So if you have, a built-in event that you do every month, then you can kind of slide it in there. But if you wanted to do a bigger event, then you would propose a budget and then kind of go that way. But, it's different when you're doing it trophy hunting, a new up and coming smaller brand, or Puma, where it's like, you go to talk, it's like you go to the agencies, you charge the guy off the street one price and Nike a whole nother price. So it was like, we have Puma and we're trying to leverage as many relationships as we can, but we know that Puma wasn't our only collaboration at the time. And it was really just things needing to kind of fall in line, and everything fell in line at the right time. And it was just like one thing after the other, and it was great. And, we're sitting here in January, in the middle of January, and we haven't released anything new, but we're preparing for a release in a month now. So it's like a lot of planning and timing kind of goes into this stuff, and money. But when you're dealing with those big brands, it's really just fighting for what and when you think things need to be done. And the product was great. The product part was easy. It was the other stuff that we had to challenge ourselves on, trying to figure out the best way to do it. But it all came out great, and it was a good experience.
What I think that is genius about what you're doing is you guys have this studio, right, where you're doing design, you're doing the back end side of things, the behind the scenes work, but then you're also building a brand as well. And I think that where the shift is of where companies are, which is another reason why we wanted to doing everything different, right? We have our agency and our service, but we want to be able to showcase what we can do, have a consumer facing brand to do collaborations and stuff like that. And I think it's going to be the new way of doing business. And I think what you all are doing is so smart of setting that up and structuring that. Was that intentional of like how you're like, okay, these pieces could kind of all connect, or did it just kind of happen organically?
It happens organically, what projects we take on, but very strategically, this is the model, right? Like when I left Nike, there was something missing. And for me, like creatively, and I had a 2-year non-compete. So I started doing art and drawing like every day, and ended up doing an art show. And I felt like, oh, this is like totally fulfilling. I don't have to listen to anybody. Like I could do whatever I want. So I knew that I would have to do, I structure my work life now into like three parts. And one of them is like consulting and being able to kind of be in the know of what's happening from bigger brands, smaller brands, but just like being in other people's organization. And then trophy hunting, which is our pride and joy, our baby, and something that needs to be nurtured. Mm-hmm. But we don't want to feel the pressure of having to do something for money, because as you're building a brand, it's like there's so many shortcuts that you could take, but you're just killing your brand. And we know we didn't want to do that. And then I do art on my own time for whatever the hell I feel like. And like that for me gives me creative freedom and something just to like get out of my brain. But without the other two things, like I would still be missing something. So that's kind of, I accepted work-life balance as that. Like, this is my life. This is what I enjoy doing. My hobbies are all kind of like mixed in with all of this. I started playing golf, and then it's like, oh, let's make golf polos, So yeah. It all intertwines. But I do 100% feel that like different avenues of either making money or spending your time is how people are truly going to be fulfilled, because it's really easy to do stuff now. Like, it wasn't even in 2005 when we were trying to start a brand. Like, we had like really deep connections with footwear factories. So when we showed up at the trade shows with footwear, people were like, holy shit, like, how did you guys do that?
Yeah.
And now you can do it in 2 weeks, get your own shoe. So
everything's changed. Magic was the place where you had to go, like it's a whole different world.
Yeah, for real.
So what I think people can take from this, right, especially creatives that are coming up, and from your story, from what I see, is that you tried a bunch of stuff, right? Like, you tried stuff, seen what you liked, seen what you were good at, built these skills to be able to build this up. And now you've created a balance of all of these things that you're good at to balance. Okay, this is where the revenue comes from. This is the baby where we can put time into this, and we don't have to, put this brand out and do stupid collaborations and stuff just to make money. And then I can do art to get that out.
Yeah.
I think the balance of that is so important. And I think people they get nervous of like, oh, I have to have it figured out right this second, or this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I love what you just said with that. And I think people can take from that of like, go and figure it out and learn your stuff. And then it'll all come together, and you'll figure out how to balance it later.
No, dude, nothing is forever. And when I went to work at AN1, I was like, all these people were like way older than me. And I'm like, what are you guys doing after this? Like, there's nothing like this. I was planning on working there forever for the most part. And, it ended because they sold the company. But it was one of those things where every time I'm involved in something, I'm like, oh, this may be like the one that like makes me retire. And that's just not the case. I think patience is like the biggest thing that I've learned over the years, is that it's not going to be like one item that makes you rich and retires you onto some island. It doesn't happen that way. It might, but for me, I can't think of that. So it's like, I enjoy coming in and, putting out fires all morning and getting able to like design stuff and work with like cool people, all the time. So that for me is the reward, and everything else is just part of the game.
That's something I had to learn too. It's like, you think you're going to get this big hit, and it's like, you're not. It's the small wins that compound over and over.
Or that big hit's going to come when you're not expecting it, or you're not planning it. You just, like you said, you got to put yourself in positions to where you could be lucky.
Right. And the more positions you put yourself in, the luckier you end up getting.
Exactly.
What if you had to go back and tell, your younger self that was just starting out, that was going into AN1 and kind of going in this journey, what would that message be to him of just like looking back and giving some advice?
Honestly, it would be to take each opportunity as a stepping stone, not as like the final gateway to the promised land. Because, like you think you have to do it all right away. And a lot of things take patience. And I didn't have that at all. Like I was like, I'm here now. What can I do? Like I worked all the time, and I didn't necessarily get burnt out, but it was, you just set yourself up for needing that type of work pace to feel like you're doing something. And eventually you do get just exhausted of just on the hamster wheel. And, I was always told like work harder, and if you can work smarter at the same time, then that just means you can work more. So I think now it's like for me, unlocking the whole like 3 pillars of work life that I have now, it's finally set me in a place where, I can spend time doing stuff that's still creative, but not feel like I'm wasting time. Cause that's kind of how I used to be. It's like, oh, well, if I go on vacation, then I'm just wasting time. Like I could be like bettering my business or, getting another opportunity or, applying somewhere that I really want to work or doing something. But the being patient, but also like knowing what you want, like it does take failures, but you have to really go after what you want and kind of set that bar. And then if you don't make it, so what? It's like it's a learning process to figure out how to achieve these things. But trying is like part of the gig, and you can't win everything. So,
Yeah.
but you can't go halfway. And I think sometimes people, I know I've seen 100 brands on Instagram, like with cool mood boards, and then it's like they're gone a year later. Or people like starting music careers, and it's like, oh, I make beats. It's like, oh, no, I don't, because I got a job at somewhere else doing something. It's like, okay, well, you weren't really committed to doing that, because you have to say no to certain things to really show your focus and your endurance of like really wanting to do something. And I think people like flip flop back and forth. It's like this, I'm a multi hyphenate. It's like, oh, I design, I'm a stylist, I do this and that. And, it's like, sometimes it's like, all right, well, what do you want to do? And what do you do? Because people don't want to work with people who are, it's like you hit them up for a stylist because they have access to people that they dress and build their brands from their clothing. But then it's like, oh, I need one in my size. It's like, I'm an influencer too. It's like, okay, well, I'm not hiring you for an influencer. I'm hiring you to do this, or I'm working with you to do that. So just stay on have a focus and kind of like double down on yourself. Cause I think people don't give themselves a true shot because they're just quick to leave it when it gets a little hard.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know that to be true. It's
because it ain't
definitely
easy.
a process. It's not. It's not. How do you stay motivated during those hard times, or just like stay on track? Because I mean, entrepreneurship and just doing your own thing, being a creative, just all of that stuff comes with these like really severe winters where you're like struggling, where you either you can't be creative, or things just aren't going your way, or you just keep getting rejection after rejection. How do you mentally stay tough to keep moving forward?
It's hard. It's super hard. I think entrepreneurship is probably the hardest thing you can do, because it's like you're solely responsible for like whatever your needs are, whether it's money, whether it's like an emotional thing. But for me, I try to like not react on my first emotional like reaction. I don't want to have a quick action after I emotionally react, because it's like every morning I wake up, something's wrong, and it's like you can't let that defeat you. It does some days, but you kind of have to look at it like, okay, this isn't the end of the world. Do I need to work on it now, or is this something that is there something more important? So I try to just like take a step back emotionally and then really figure out like what I'm really reacting to, because a lot of times it's something that isn't that big of a deal, and
Yeah.
you end up stressing other people out, and for me it's like I have never been really good at that, so I'm trying to be as even keel as possible and be emotionally involved, but it's so hard because it's like you're dealing with other people, you're dealing with things that are way out of your control, and it's just part of the gig.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it's like, go get a job, and it's
All
like,
right.
for me, I've done that, and it's like, okay, this isn't worse than that. So
Yeah.
I can have an actual memory of an alternative that I just don't want to do. So
I agree. I think the thing that's been helping me recently of like, as long as I got my health and everybody is like good, everything else could be fixed, right? If it's money, if it's like that stuff is really not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. And so when things go wrong, because they always do, it's just kind of like, all right, cool, let's figure out a solution and how to fix it and move forward. But that has taken a lot of work to get to that point. And
no, like I
yeah,
said, I wake up like once a week and I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, there's no reason. Like, it'd be so easy to just like have a check come every 2 weeks and
yep.
vacation for 2 months or however long you get now. But I don't know. Like, for me, I'm kind of just built this way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's dope, man. I really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot. I didn't know that was kind of your journey of how you've kind of built your career. I think from a standpoint, you have a lot of knowledge. And I think that, yeah, starting a podcast, doing content, I really encourage you to do that because I think you'll bring a lot of value to the world. I think you've just done some dope stuff, man. And I think this is just the beginning. I can see where things are headed and how, things are going to grow and evolve for you. And so, I really appreciate this conversation. Where can people find you? How can they get in contact with you if they want to work with you or purchase some stuff?
No, thank you. No, the more people like you do this stuff, it helps me kind of see that it's possible and has actual effect. Because it's like I follow you and other people that are like-minded to where it's like, okay, these people aren't Gary Vee, but
Right.
it's more in line with kind of who I am. So it's great, and thank you for having me on. My brand Trophy Hunting is Trophy Hunting on Instagram. You can find me on Instagram at Dustin Canalin, and that's pretty much it. Like, I'm available all the time. Like, I don't take on as many projects as I used to, just trying to manage like what I can kind of tend to in a way that I'm engaged in, which is like I'm lucky and grateful to be at that point where I don't have to take like jobs for money.
Yeah.
So no, let me know. I got a lot. There's a lot happening. Hopefully a podcast or some sort of something soon.
You should do it.
But,
you should do it. If I could help in any way, let me know.
What's funny
worked
is
out a little system.
I looked into like setting it up and I'm like, oh my God, this is overwhelming. Like the amount of equipment. Cause of course it's like, oh, I want the best this, the best that.
Yeah.
But
I can help. Seriously, if you want to set it up, it's really not that complicated, especially with like software and how to set it up. You can do it for relatively cheap.
Yeah.
I want to see you do this because I think you'll help a lot of people coming up just with your journey and how you've been able to maneuver and do things. So whatever I can do to be a resource, let me know.
Awesome. No, I appreciate it. We'll definitely catch up.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you being on the show, and I'm excited to continue to watch you build in 2024. And we'll see you in a minute.
No, likewise. Thank you.
For sure. Peace.
All right, peace.